noise and ringing, like an alarm. Like, I don't know, it's like a kid's toy. Do you
Like
hear
Christmas.
that? It's like Christmas. It's a
Uh-huh.
Christmas. Anyway, welcome to the Hoff Time Report. I am Wayne Hoffman, of course, and today we're joined by Representative Judy Boyle. Welcome. Glad to have you
Hi.
here.
This is fun.
Yeah, I've been wanting to visit with you for quite a while, so I appreciate you coming out. Now, looking, you read a person's bio, just kind of to reflect on make sure your memory is correct about all the different things you're doing, which committees you're on, and all that kind of stuff. And it says you're in your 7th term in the legislature. But that actually is not quite accurate, because I remember you serving in the Senate way back, early, was it 2000, 2001?
2001 and 2.
So that's not in there. That doesn't talk about that in the bio, I don't think.
No, I don't know.
Well, anyway,
It was fun.
but
I learned a lot.
The Senate's a very different beast, and it's unusual to have somebody who goes from the Senate to the circumstances were different. You were serving in the capacity of another senator as a substitute, long-time substitute. But those bodies are terribly different. Does that give you some insight into how those people, the 35-member chamber behaves?
It was a great learning experience. I learned how to deal with senators and how to talk to them. And I always warn my House colleagues, never go to the Senate with your bill. Always get your Senate sponsor to do it.
Yeah, it's a weird place. Why is that?
I really don't know. I don't know why we're so different. We're the same districts. I don't know.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer too. I've been watching this for years, and there are obviously, it's a smaller body. People, you move up in power pretty quickly because there aren't any Democrats, hardly any official Democrats. We'll talk about that. But everyone's a chair or a vice chair in the Republican Party pretty quickly. I wonder if that has something to do with it, but who knows? I didn't want to talk about all that. I wanted to get right into the stuff that you're working on. By the way, I really enjoyed, I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but there was a minor resolution that, it was to recognize the 50th anniversary of the Snake River National Recreation Area. Boy, I'm terrible.
Sawtooth.
Sorry, I knew there was something. It's
Sawtooth.
Late. I am so sorry.
SNRA. Yes.
Man, it's been a long day. That's embarrassing. I have to. My excuse is I was up at 4:00 this morning talking to a candidate for the legislature.
I'm sorry.
I'm not even gonna. It was about an hour-long conversation. He emailed me and said, "Hey, are you awake?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
No.
And I'm like, "Okay, I'll talk to you." So yeah, I may screw some facts up tonight because of just how messed up my brain is, and I needed some rest. But the Sawtooth National Recreation Resolution. Ordinarily something like that comes up and it's like, oh yeah, we love X, Y, and Z, and you vote on it and it passes. And you got up and said, now, wait a minute, tell us about the debate, because people should watch it if they didn't see it, but it was really good.
I did say, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute in the committee. I don't have anything at all against the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. It's a beautiful place, and it's great to recognize this is the 50th year of its being. That's fantastic. But in the therefores, there was about 4 lines that didn't belong there, and it was talking about future public land designations. Now, to me, that means expansion. Does that mean wilderness? Are we going to make the SNRA larger? What are we talking about? And I never got a straight answer in the committee.
And the efforts have been there to expand SNRA for 30, 40 years. So it's not some idle threat, but you're voicing the opinion of the legislature that, yeah, you're okay with that. And bills have words, and words have meanings, and meanings have consequences.
That's correct.
Amen. It was really good. It was nice to see that. And yeah, do you think that people understand the gravity of the situation? I mean, that this really has been a problem for Idaho, this locking up of all these federal lands.
Absolutely. And I went through that a little bit on the floor. They must have understood because there were only 18 votes yes. And today the House sponsor came to me and said, hey, if we take that out, will you be okay with it? I said, sure. So they're going to re-RS it.
Okay. Well, that's a victory. I don't d but I wanna go back to something you just said. So you said you don't mind the recognizing the 50th anniversary. Is it really a celebratory thing, though? I mean, I know it's a, beautiful portion of Idaho, but how great has that been ultimately?
Well, I guess for the people that want it, it was a wonderful thing.
Are there no recognitions that there's some negative consequences of having land designated and locked away?
Well, at least SNRA, it is not a wilderness. It's not the Boulder White Clouds.
Right.
There are multiple use
Right, but I guess
activities.
I said it wrong. Not really locked away, but under the control of the federal government, with very little. I mean, you can't do with it what you would want to do if it were under state or private management. That's what I mean by that. It's not locked up like a wilderness area, but it's not really utilized to its full potential either because of the designation.
A lot of the private land within it has either been bought up or it's been very restricted on what they can do with their private land.
Yeah.
I mean, 50 years ago, would I have thought that? If I'd had a chance, you bet I would have. But at that time, it was either that or wilderness. That was their choice.
Yeah, and that always seems to be the thing, and that was the way with the Owyhees, and they use the same threat for the Boulder White Clouds. So, I mean, is this our long-term fate, I guess, that we're always going to be taking the second of the 2 worst possible options?
Well, when Congress is in control by Democrats and they're the ones that make those designations,
That's true, but at the same time, and you have congressional experience. You work with, Representative Helen Chenoweth, who, God bless her, amazing woman. FLIPMA has been in the law forever, and, um, even still was the case through a Republican administration, through a Republican-controlled Congress. There's no will in the Republican Party to do something about the policy that says we're just gonna continue forever grow or control the land within states like Idaho.
we were able to stop some things, though, that class of 94. And they pretty much focused on the budget. Remember, that was the last time we were in the black because they worked really, really hard to reduce that deficit.
Yeah, that certainly that's true, but, I mean, okay, so we have to go all the way back to '94 to find a list of heroes who, even among the Republicans. So, I mean, if you project forward and think to yourself, "Okay, Republicans may one day control Congress again." Would you imagine that there would be the horsepower to change the narrative so that so much land that is ours is not controlled by the feds?
Well, back then, the House did do a lot of things, but it was the Senate who stopped it, and the Senate was in Republican control.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
What do you attribute that to? So this is an ongoing problem,
It is.
and we talk about this a lot in the space of the Idaho legislature, of course, but it's also true. I mean, it's the same in Congress as it is in the state legislature is what I should say.
It
So
is.
people who think that we've got a Republican-controlled House and Senate and governor's office in Idaho, and they think that somehow policies are being constructed in a much more conservative fashion in the state. Do you think that that's the case?
Well, we have an example this week of a House bill on pornography in libraries that little kids could get a hold of. That was horrifying. We passed that to prevent that kind of thing from happening in the House. The Senate wouldn't even take it up. In fact, the majority leader, or the pro tem, I mean, over there, chastised the House for being crazy.
Yep. And not just that, there's also the trans bill. He said that you're crazy for sending that over, the bill that basically says you can't mutilate children, with
Exactly.
prepubescent children, you can't mutilate them, change their genders and stuff like that. Passed the House overwhelmingly,
Mhm.
gets over to the Senate, and Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder who interestingly last year said, "Oh, I don't have anything to do with committees deciding whether to hear a bill or not." This year, he's all powerful, almighty, and has made the unilateral decision to not hear that bill, those two bills, or I guess any of the vaccine or mask mandate legislation or the COVID related legislation.
I don't know what they're doing over there. I don't know if the pro tem did this on his own or if that's how their caucus feels or just their leadership team. Honestly, I have no idea.
But the point is, though, that this is a Republican legislature, and one body seemed to take a pretty conservative position on that and other issues, and this other body said, no, we're just not going to take that up.
Not even to hear it.
Not even to hear it. Now, you've been around for through 7 terms, and we talked about the Senate part, but through 7 terms. So how many speakers is that? 3?
2.
2. You weren't here for Newcomb.
No.
Oh, well, you missed a treat. Anyway, so Denny and Bedkey, have conditions changed so much in regard to how the body operates in that time? Because it seems like there's a shift.
Well, Denny was very much a hands off, with the members.
You don't get that from the current. And mind you, you're the chairman of a committee.
Not anymore.
Oh, that's right. You were the chairman of a committee.
I
Jeez,
was the chairman of a committee until the speaker removed me.
I sound like somebody who doesn't know a freaking thing about what's going on at the legislature, and that's really disappointing because I'm really better than this. But yeah, you were the chairman of the. I'm just not at the Capitol enough.
Yeah, he removed me because he didn't like the fact that I thought someone else should be the speaker. He'd been the speaker for a long time.
Okay. Yep. And the retribution was, as it has been for other people, not just you, that you lose your chairmanship. How does that happen without people going, oh man, this is a lot of power for one person?
Well, people do think that. That's why they don't buck him at all, because they don't want to lose their chairmanship.
Is that represented in actual actions that take place on the floor of the House?
I believe it is.
In what way?
Because you see the chairman and the vice chairman vote with the leadership, at least with him. A lot of times the 4 don't vote together.
The accusation has been made that there are actual threats where the speaker says to, by the way, I've asked the speaker to be on the program. I'm hoping he will. It'd be great to have this conversation with him. But where people are told, look, if you like that, I see you like that job as vice chairman. Be ashamed if something happened to that role or was given to somebody else. Not necessarily in those words, but the threat is vote the wrong way. You risk losing this position of prestige. Is that true?
I've been told that by chairman and vice chairman, and I tell them, really? You think a chairmanship or a vice chairmanship is that important? You're willing to give up how you think you should vote for your constituents?
Is that a usual conversation?
Yeah.
Really? So what's the allure then? And what's the answer to that question when you pose that?
I guess they like the power of being a chairman or a vice chairman. I loved being the chairman of agriculture because I love agriculture, but I wasn't willing to go along to get along to keep that.
So that cost you the position. Does that make you feel freer to push limits or to engage in ways that perhaps some of your colleagues are not?
Well, it gives me a lot more time, instead of doing things that chairmen have to do to run their committee and line up, all the bills and all the people to come and present. You can work on your own legislation. And the best part of it is I now am in an office with a window so I can see that there is life out there.
Oh yeah, you were down buried at the back of the complex there for some reason they designed a room with zero light.
No light whatsoever. Yeah.
Clever.
I never saw light the whole time.
So you get more vitamin D. That's excellent.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Okay. So that's that's something that a difference between operating styles between Denny, who, by the way, the media would refer to as Boss Denny, and Scott Bedke, who gets a pass on how he operates this house. Um, and and you've also seen then a transition as well when it came to personal bills. The personal bills used to go to the Germain Committee, and now they go to the Ways and Means Committee and don't see the light of day after that. And I know you've had some votes on the floor. I don't, on the grocery tax and various other bills. How does that play out in your mind relative to the power of the speaker and the way in which the body responds to that power?
Well, at first, he was trying to tell people this was a procedural vote to pull it out of a committee. It is not. Rule 17 allows any member, and I read this to the entire chamber one day, that Rule 17 allows any member to ask a bill to be pulled out of a committee. It's not a procedural vote that you have to vote the way the leadership team tells you.
Then why do they do it? Why is that a big deal and so unusual?
I have no idea.
Now you're in a border community, and
Correct.
so this grocery tax thing is a big deal for you.
It's a huge big deal. So my district for at least 30 years have been trying to get rid of the grocery tax because everybody just goes across the river and there's no sales tax on groceries there.
Mm.
Fruitland doesn't even have a grocery store because of it.
They did at one time.
I think they had a couple.
Yeah.
But they just couldn't compete.
Mm. So you can't even get a hearing on that bill. You can't get a discussion going.
No, and one of the members, it was suggested to him, well, just take a regular bill then, take an RS and take it to the Germain chairman. The Germain chairman wouldn't even accept the RS packet.
How is that allowed to go on? I mean, each of you is elected to represent the same number of people, 45,000 people-ish, 50,000 in the next count,
Correct.
next
Yes.
redistricting. Theoretically, you all have the exact same power. So, I mean, you've been a committee chairman. Did you allow hearings when a legislator came, or did you sift through those and go, yeah, this one, not this one, maybe this other one?
The only bills that I held were agency bills.
Really? Good for you. People don't ask questions about the agency bills. The agency bills just kind of show up, and they don't even have to have a sponsor. They can just bring them in, and here's the thing that we want. And there's a lot of deference given to the agencies.
Well, the director told me she had no bills whatsoever for the session, and the next day 4 of them showed up.
Yeah, that would give you a little heartburn, I would imagine.
And the bills they didn't look to me to be necessary bills. So I put them in my drawer. She never came and talked to me, so I figured she didn't really want them anyway.
And so you give a lot of deference to your own colleagues, I guess, in this regard. I mean, when you look at a print hearing, do you think the print hearing is perfunctory, that you're representative and I have this bill, and okay, so you should be allowed to have that hearing on your bill?
Well, people go to a lot of work, as you know, to come up with an idea, or else they get it from their constituents, this idea, and they go to a lot of work to perfect it. And then you take it to legislative services. They draft it up into bill form or just into a draft form. And then you shop it around to your colleagues and say, do you see any problems with this? Or maybe you even take it to the agency if there's an affected agency and say, is this a problem? If it's a law enforcement bill, you take it to law enforcement. Do you see any issues? It takes a lot of time and effort. And then when it's finally ready, then it goes through the RS process, and then it's ready to come to committee.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
And
Yes.
so I guess there's some obvious offense a person would take if they go through all that effort and then a committee chairman just says, "Nah, not going to do that."
Especially if they don't even give you any kind of reason other than I don't like you. Go away.
So this is obviously the case on the grocery tax. And we've seen these motions over the course of, I don't know, a month now. Or is it working Is it softening people's understanding of why this is important? Why is that? The same number of people vote each time, now we're down to 9.
Yep.
What's happening there?
Well, there's no discussion allowed
They
on the
didn't call for
floor
the previous
anymore.
question,
Yes.
and so there's no debate on it anymore. You can barely talk about what a bill is about. Today, the one was on the gas tax. It was Tammy Nichols' bill to lower the gas tax or suspend it some portion
Yes.
going forward because of Bidenflation. Um, that can't get a hearing. So even the Democrats, I guess, would acknowledge that many of their bills don't get hearings either, that they've been wanting for a long time. Scott Bedke once called the legislature an arena of ideas. How much of that remains the case?
I guess it depends on whose idea it is.
If I'm just an ordinary legislator elected from, I don't know, Chalice, I'm just throwing a place out. Um, do my ideas have as much weight as, say, a member of leadership?
They should.
But does that in reality? Is that the practice?
Unfortunately, it's become all about personalities. And I've watched this through the years. I was always taught it doesn't matter who's carrying the bill, you take that out. It doesn't matter who's debating. It's not the personality, it's what are the words in the bill? Is this good? Is it bad? Does it need changed? Is it going to cause a problem? Is it constitutional? But unfortunately, over the years, it's become I don't like that person, so I'm going to vote against it.
Wow. And you've seen that transformation.
Absolutely.
Is that because of I don't know, is it because of the way the building is laid out now? I know you because you were there in the Senate and you remember what it was like in those little tiny committee rooms, and now we've got that big sprawling thing on the basement floor of the Capitol. Is it because of the committee rooms? Is it because of the leadership? Is it because of the technology maybe? We can watch it on streaming on the internet. We don't talk to people. What's the reason for that change in behavior?
I think it's a little bit of all of it. The legislature, as you remember, when everybody was all crowded in the chamber
Oh,
and
yeah.
nobody really had offices, the chairman's offices, remember a desk would only fit in there and one
Yep.
chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it forced everybody to talk to each other and be friends with each other. And now it's like a divided camp. And it's really sad. It should not be like that. We're almost becoming like Congress.
Yeah, you race the floor session ends, you can actually go from the chamber to the hearing rooms without ever interacting with the public
Or each other.
or each other.
Relationships are what builds things in the legislature. It's relationship with your constituents, with other members, even with some of the agency people. I learned that when I worked for Helen. If I wanted to find out something, I would find out whoever in the federal agency that I was working on, who did I think was honest, that would tell me the truth, and I would go and visit with them. When a constituent had a problem, like with BLM, was it the state director? Was it the area director? Was it maybe the range con? Who could I find that would answer my question honestly and would actually be willing to help? And that's how you pass things in the legislature. That's how you work on things.
So how do you get that back? How do you get to a place where that's no longer I mean, we're obviously not gonna rip out the office space. There's actually a bill coming to you to spend $11 million more on house office spaces. We can't give property tax relief, but yeah, there's a bill to it's an appropriation. Just you wait. Breaking news. But anyway, how do you get back to a place where there is actual civility in that body? And I've noticed that too, even when I've gone to testify on bills. It used to be you stood at the dais and you had all the people sitting around a table, and now you've got this more judicial kind of setting, and the questions coming from some legislators has been almost like an inquisition on not just me, but some of my team, and I've seen other people lobbying the legislature as well who've not been treated very kindly, not like fellow Idaho citizens. How do you get back to where we were?
Well, we're going to have a huge turnover in both the House and the Senate. Lots of members are retiring or they're moving, House members trying to move to the Senate. So that'll be a huge different kind of makeup. There's a lot of conservatives running this year, and we'll have a new leadership team on both sides.
The House has become more conservative over the time that you've been in the legislature. What has that done to the dynamic? It seems like there's a lot of division, and I think every day somebody writes an article about how the Freedom Foundation is responsible for it. I mean, obviously, we don't control everything that happens over there.
I
But
hope not.
I mean, just every day I pick something up like, oh, I didn't even know I was involved in that legislation. Good to know. But there is a division between Republicans and um, other people who are Republicans. Ho What has that done to what does that look like on the ground to you for somebody who's been there for a while?
I think that all started when the healthcare bill came. Remember Otter Care that we
The
referred
health
to?
insurance exchange, yep.
Yes.
Nine twen
That's when
2013.
Mhm. That's really when I noticed the division. We had a consensus in our caucus. I mean, we had the majority of the Republican caucus opposed, but yet it went through because that's what the speaker wanted. He wanted that bill. That's what he pretty much campaigned on to become speaker.
The implementation of Obamacare.
That's what it was.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So, that is an interesting year because 2013, we was the I think that was the first year we started doing the index, but also it was yes, it was
Yeah.
because the index was in the back of my mind when we put that together. It was like, how do you measure growth of government? And it was one of the bills we knew was gonna be coming, and so we had to put together the tool, but that was also the year that reapportionment, there was a huge new class of freshmen. So, is it your expectation it would seem as if there were folks who just had a little bit of different view of what government should be about with that class, and that's been growing. What is what does that do to the conflicts that you're already seeing there?
Well, that was the beginning of it for sure, of the division.
So you
We had a contested race for the speaker with an extremely close vote, and that divided the caucus. And it's just been getting more and more divided ever since then.
what's the difference in philosophy between the 2 camps?
At this point, I don't even think it's philosophy. I think it's personalities.
Well, there's
Everybody's
gotta be some underpinning of they just view government differently from the rest of the body. There's the conservative group, and then I mean, and that extends out quite a ways. If we judge it just by the index, 70% and higher typically, and then you've got this other group, and they're all Republicans, and they vote very differently from the first group. What's the difference in mentality? And in fact, in your new district, the race that you're gonna be in, you're very different from Scott Syme.
about total opposites.
Explain those differences. What's your worldview different? How is your worldview different from Scott? And I'm not trying to denigrate him, I'm just trying to understand more about how you might view things differently than he does.
Well, I don't know how he views things. You'll have to ask him. But my view is I always try to look, is this constitutional? Whatever bill we have before us, is it written well, or is there a lot of gray area here? Is it going to cause problems? Do we really need it? Can we afford it? Is the proper role of government? I think we've gotten away from what is constitutional. We've never, ever had classes on the Constitution. If you didn't grow up with it, you don't know what it is, pretty much.
You learn in elementary school or junior high or high school or whatever that there's this thing called a constitution, and that denotes the 3 branches of government, and here's your Bill of Rights, and can you remember the preamble? It's horrible, and it's no wonder we have what we have, which is why we're always fighting about things like amending the Constitution and so on. We should get to that. But I want to finish down this trail.
Okay.
You mentioned proper role of government. Do your colleagues understand what that means?
I don't know. I know what it means,
What do you
but I
what do
can't
you
say
think?
what they
What
think.
do you think it means?
I think you follow the Constitution.
So,
The Constitution limits government, not us, not citizens. By us, I mean citizens, not legislators.
right. So, but you see all the time legislation that clearly deviates from that. I mean, for example, the federal government has no place in education,
Mm.
but we take gobs of money from the federal government for that, gobs of money from the federal government for Medicaid and virtually every program under the sun. Um, why is there not a conversation taking place on the floor of the House where somebody says, "Wait a minute, this Medicaid thing, are we supposed to be doing that?"
Well, actually, we had that conversation, and I'm the one that brought up the proper role of government. That was, I can't remember the number of the bill, but I called it the Anacostia projects. It was
Yeah, it
workforce
was
housing.
it was the workforce housing legislation. Yes, you did. It was the workforce housing bill where the state was purporting to put together a fund that developers can draw from to deal with the workforce housing situation. And that there's been programs like that before, which you pointed out, and that resulted in these horrible housing, projects.
I don't think that's the proper role of government. And people were arguing, well, this is the federal money, and if we don't take it, some other state's going to get it. That shouldn't have anything to do with our conversation.
But shouldn't we help with this housing problem? Maybe it'll just fix it.
No, that's private enterprise to do.
Why don't your colleagues understand that?
I don't know.
And how pervasive is that thinking? In other
Well,
words,
it passed.
what do you think your colleagues would not support in terms of a role for government?
I don't know.
Does
Uh,
that
That one to me was pretty far out there. And I know all the big businesses, they really pushed that bill. They really supported it. If their workers need housing, they can build the housing for them, not the taxpayers.
yet here we are? That's too bad. So if we look across the spectrum at these policies, though, that come, I mean, I have this conversation with people all the time where, okay, um, the state of Idaho, if you're a taxpayer, you're funding Idaho Public Television, you're funding Boise State Public Radio, and you're funding Idaho State Public Radio. And people will complain and say, Congress should do something about that. The legislature itself has a role. Why can't the Idaho legislature say, you know what? We're not going to fund public television anymore?
I always vote against it for all the good that does.
And
There's
that
not
was
enough
really
of
weird
us.
this year too, because you had Vito Barbieri and some other people stand up on the floor and say, I hate to say this, but I'm going to support this budget. Almost as if the proper role of government didn't matter.
And I don't know why they thought that. I have no idea. I think if people want that, they should pay for it themselves. You can donate to that. So donate to it and pay for it yourself. Don't make your neighbor who never watches or listens to it have to pay for it.
But that's that schism within the party again, within the
Yeah.
caucus, where you've got folks who are like, oh, public television is a wonderful thing. My kid watches public television and they love public television. So I'm going to vote in support of public television, not really considering the fact that you had to actually steal money from somebody in order to make that happen.
I think it's just become so accustomed that people we're not thinking about it. We're not having those conversations. Is this a proper role of government to do this? It's for so many years, it's just happened automatically and everybody just expects it, I guess.
Do you think that that's going to continue, or do you think that a new crop of legislators will come forward and maybe change the direction a little bit on that and other programs?
Well, I guess it depends on who wins each one of those races.
That is true. Um, there was another conversation about the proper role of government, also on the floor of the House, and it is in the Constitution relative to the function of a state lottery. And the question was, should we expand the Powerball? Tell me what your thoughts are on that whole.
So that was the one where we'd bring in other
Yep,
countries.
that was the one.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
But it's in the Constitution. So some of your colleagues would say, well, I'm just following the Constitution.
But the Constitution doesn't say we can have join with other
It
countries.
does not say that. It most definitely does not say that. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are too on the notion of just having, because it is in the lottery is in the Constitution, and there are people like me who say, well, you have as a business model government taking money from poor people. I mean, that's their business models. You have to take. If you could, would you get rid of it, even if it's in the let's say so you had maybe the lottery budget, or a bill that shrank the lottery. Would you do that?
Probably.
Even
If
though
we could shrink
but
it.
it's in the Constitution.
And we can change the Constitution. I mean, if enough people said, we don't want gambling, because that's what it is, we do not want this, it's just an exception, then we should change the
Do
Constitution.
you think the voters made a bad choice when they added that to the Constitution?
They might have. A lot of times people go in to vote. I mean, tons of people have told me this. They went in to vote. They had no idea there was a constitutional amendment there. They didn't understand what it was. And we've all seen how they're worded.
Yeah.
Yes means no. It's very, very confusing most of the time. And there's never enough conversation about what's coming up for voters to have a really good opinion, yes or no.
It's a pretty crappy way to formulate public policy.
It is.
Even worse so with some of these initiatives. The last one being the Medicaid initiative, which, I think voters were terribly uninformed about. It's costing way more money than anticipated. Shocker. I always tell the story about how in 1942, the voters of Idaho passed a pension law that said if you're over the age of 65, you get a pension. I don't know if did you know that? Voters in 1942 passed a pension law. Legislature 43 came to town and said, gosh, how are we going to pay for this thing? And the answer was they couldn't. And so that legislature repealed the Pension Act in the 1943 legislature because it was the responsible thing to do. But now the legislature's default position is, well, will of the people.
They're afraid they might get unelected. It wasn't the will of the people. Legislators worry about, if I say no, then they might unelect me.
So the scary thing about that is Reclaim Idaho will probably get its tax increase proposal on the ballot to raise income taxes and supposedly push more money into public schools. Do you think the legislature would have the wherewithal to go and repeal something like that that's passed by the voters if it happens to get passed?
I hope that they would. I mean, if they understand 60% of the budget goes to education as it is, plus all of that federal money that came. We have school districts with literally millions of dollars in their savings that they don't even know how they're going to spend. And we're increasing public education this year 11.3%.
But how confident are you that the legislature would look at that and say, I know what you would do, obviously, but that they would look at it and say, the voters were wrong. We're going to go and repeal this.
Again, it depends on who wins all those elections.
Right now, that it wouldn't happen.
Probably not. Probably wouldn't.
That's really too bad.
And again, I don't know if the voters really understand. They sign these petitions, but they're signing them based on what the person is holding the clipboard, who's getting paid for every single signature. Are they telling you the truth? And supposedly all this money is going to go to teachers.
Yeah,
I don't believe that
either.
in a second.
It's interesting because it would seem as if the right public policy would be to raise the threshold for passage You could do that. That wasn't addressed by the state Supreme Court's ruling, as misguided as the ruling was. Why is that not why is that concept not being entertained?
I don't know.
Hmm,
It hasn't been brought up that I know of.
hmm. Do you think that's is that something you would be favorable to? Maybe making it 66 2/3 to pass an initiative?
Well, I really don't like initiatives as it is because we live in a Republican form of government,
Yes, ma'am.
not a
And the
democracy.
direct democracy was the thing that our founders were terrified of the most. Do
Absolutely.
we have a direct democracy now, you think, in all functionality beyond just the initiative process?
Well, the initiatives definitely make it that way.
How worried does that leave you? I mean, is there any concern that that's how public policy is gonna be done going forward? You just go to the ballot box?
Well, we can look at our neighboring states and see that's exactly how it's done.
Hmm.
California, Oregon, Washington, that's how they run their state.
Given the nature of that direction, does the legislature really I mean, does the does the legislature play that role that you understood the legislatures to play relative to the citizenry and the federal government as conceived by the founders? Are they doing the job that the founders thought they were supposed to do?
Well, first you have to understand what the founders wanted. And, I have advocated for years that, we have mandatory ethics training, mandatory civility training. Why don't we have a mandatory constitutional training?
Why don't you?
Because Speaker didn't think that was necessary.
You've asked about it.
I have asked about
What
it.
was your idea?
A constitution class.
I mean, what would that look like? How did you imagine that being done? Who would do it? I mean, because you could have a constitution class, but you could have Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Well, not now, but you could have at one time.
I think
Sorry, is it too soon? But you could have an absolute lib, and there are plenty of them around who would teach them. In fact, call the state bar up, and they'll have the most leftist of the leftist attorneys on their roster come out and teach the Constitution class. Would you really benefit from something like that? Or is the problem that people are getting elected who have no devotion to the Constitution whatsoever?
Well, Hillsdale College, as you know, they have a great online Constitution 101. I wouldn't care if they just showed that. It's basic, very, very basic.
Is that to say that people don't even understand then? And that goes back to my other question, that they don't even understand what their job really is.
Sometimes I wonder.
What makes you wonder I mean, what have you seen that made you wonder the most?
That workforce development bill.
Oh, that was it. That was the one.
Well, I wondered a long time before that.
What kind of made you think, and when did that occur where you were like, "Oh my gosh, these people don't understand the Constitution"? 'Cause that's
Let's
a huge
see.
allegation.
When I was a freshman, we had the Democrat, let's see, I think she was the assistant majority leader. And we had a bill that was clearly unconstitutional.
Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember what it was. I remember Labrador was there in the house at the same time.
But it was very obvious
It
that
was very obvious. And she stood up and said, I don't know if this bill is unconstitutional because I'm not sure if I ever read the Constitution. I probably
whoa,
did when I was in college. I was horrified.
a sitting state legislator said that.
Yes, that was in leadership.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
That's
Scary,
yeah.
scary. And that was a long time ago.
Does that color your thinking when people come to you and talk about, convention of states?
Oh boy. Yes.
That they just don't understand the Constitution at all?
I think a change to do something like that, a convention of states, we would lose big time.
I remember, years ago, there was a vote. I don't know, it has to have been 15 years. I don't anyway, I guess it wasn't that long ago, but it was a while back. There was a vote on either a convention of states or an Article 5, type of whatever, and the vote was really close. And you used to have the roll call pinned to your wall for, like, years because of how consequential it was to you.
Yes.
What did you see in that vote that kind of made you think, all right, I've got to put this up here and remember the names of the people who voted yes and who voted no?
Just to remind me how scary it is and how close we can come to losing our rights if you don't understand the Constitution.
And I have been to some of the convention of states meetings. They'll say things like, "Oh, well, we just want to have a balanced budget," or "We just want term limits," or and then they start talking. Really, gets I've seen legislators hold their hands up and go, "Wait a minute! If we amend the Constitution, how do we make sure we'll still get Medicaid?" Eh,
Wow.
is your concern about the expansion of government under a constitutional convention, a convention of states, or is it about the removal of constitutionally protected rights?
The removal of our rights. This was quite a few years ago, maybe my first year. Maybe I wasn't even in there yet. And there was a big push for this convention. And I used to listen every morning to NPR. I
Oh,
started that
yeah.
when I started working for Helen because back then they would tell you what they were going to do. And so I could warn her, every evening, hey, I heard this and this is what the Democrats are planning. So I was listening one day and they did a whole hour on a convention. And these were liberals, and they were laughing that the conservatives were going to bring this forward because the first thing that they would get rid of was the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is the only thing that protects the Constitution.
I'm starting to wonder if they are now considering other things as well, that they don't like the way people have been speaking out against the government and that they would restrict freedom of speech as well.
Absolutely. And who knows what else they would put in there. The other scary thing is in 1986, the Congressional Research Service was asked by Congress to research and tell them what their power was if a convention was ever really called by the states. And the answer was the only role the states have is to call for the convention. After that, Congress is in total control. They set the agenda, they decide who the delegates are, everything.
So this argument that we'll call a convention and we'll just deal with something like term limits, which is very appealing to people. They go, "Oh my
Oh,
gosh, how
yeah.
long has Jim Risch been in office? Since the 1970s?" Not in Congress, but certainly he's been in office. Well, Lindsey Graham, or name your character of choice in Congress. This is the way to stop that. What is your suggestion for dealing with these long in the tooth members of Congress that just hang around until they die?
Their voters vote them in.
That's
That's the way it
they
was designed.
they have to be more informed.
They have to be more informed or have a better candidate run against them.
Do you think that you can ever get there in the age when um, big media platforms are taking over the narrative, and the media companies don't allow a free exchange of ideas, that the special interest dollars are free flowing practically? Can you ever get to a place realistically where people do go to the ballot box and act in an informed way?
Well, I think a lot of people understand all these restrictions that the big media has put on people, and especially the social media. They understand this is not right. And all these fact checkers that aren't really checking facts,
They're figuring it out that's not true.
at least my constituents are.
Your constituents understand what's going on despite being outside of the Boise Valley.
That's why they can figure it out.
That's why. Because they're not
Because they're not in the
because they're not listening to KTVB and Brian Holmes and such.
Well, they probably can't even get that.
So they're actually better informed, not getting the regular news media. Good for them.
There's a lot of ways that you can get news. You don't have to get it from Facebook. You don't have to get it from regular TV.
Where do you get your news?
On my phone most of the time. I watch different things. People send me articles. I have so many
You're
different
not getting it from the
ways.
Idaho Statesman.
No, sometimes I read it just to laugh. Go, I'm not sure what meeting these people might have been in, but it
But it was not the one that you
wasn't.
were in?
No, mm-mm,
Do you talk to the media still?
no,
Not at all?
they don't talk to me.
Really?
Yeah.
When
The
was the last time you did a media
Well,
interview?
the last time I talked to the media was the Dyslexia Bill.
Oh, really?
And so we called a press conference so we could get a bill through. And we had all the moms and the kids, and we had the Senate sponsors, and they were all really nice. They asked direct questions, and that was great. I don't know what the result was because I don't watch their TV.
I mean, I guess if it was something like, I don't know, preventing kids from being mutilated with hormone suppressants or whatever you call those, they probably wouldn't have been so inclined to either cover it or write a favorable article.
I don't know. Sometimes they have a lot of bias.
Just you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Don't trust the liberal news. Helen didn't get along very well with the news media. Boy, they were after her big time. She was probably the first person that I can remember in Idaho politics who really was sort of under the gun of the press. And I was in the press at the time, and I remember how much they hated her. She would say one thing, and they'd spin it into something weird, that was about race relations or how she hated kids or elderly people or whatever. It was just stunning, and it's only gotten worse since then.
Yeah, it was stunning. I mean, she was a very intelligent woman, and they
Very.
hated her for that.
Well, they didn't hate her because she was intelligent, did they?
Oh, I think they did
Because she
because
was intelligent?
and she was conservative. They didn't like those
Mm.
combinations at all. Mm-mm.
They really they do you how did Helen respond to that? I mean, really, I mean, she's been gone a while now. We hear stories that she was, kind of, water off a duck's back, if you will. But I have to imagine that she was a very kind-hearted
She
lady, and it
was.
must have hit her.
Not usually. I mean, she knew who she was.
She
She
would.
was happy with who she was. She knew where she was going. And if they couldn't figure it out, that was their problem, not hers.
You don't care about the media. Helen didn't care about the media, you say. How much does the media drive public policy at the Capitol?
I guess for those people who care about it, it probably does.
What percentage of the membership do you think care about what the media have to say?
Not many.
Really? That's interesting, 'cause I would have expected you to say that many of them did. It just
I
seems
don't
like
think
they do.
so.
I mean, Chuck Winder can't shut up from talking to the media.
Well, they talk to him all the time because he's the pro tem.
That is true. You're correct. Okay, well, let's just talk about some public policy things because I don't want
Okay.
to. So, education has been hot and center this particular legislative session, as you well know. Um, there's been some discussion about education savings accounts. What's the problem there? You're there in the heat of the battle, by the way, right?
The problem is what we call Education Inc. They all speak with one voice, so that's the teachers union, the school boards, and the administrators, and they all hate it.
And you heard from all of them.
Oh, yes.
Oh, by the way, but I meant to mention that you're on the education committee. You heard from all of them at the hearing on education savings accounts.
True.
But this has been a thing that Republicans say they want, and there are more Republicans on the committee than Democrats. Why are your Republican colleagues so unwilling to embrace the idea of education choice? It can't just be the special interest groups, or is it?
I think it is.
It's only the special interest groups.
I think maybe that's just their mindset. I don't know.
Were
I mean,
you
we've been trying for years to get this
It's
through.
been many years.
It doesn't matter who's there.
What would it take to make the difference?
Well, most legislators, as I said, they want to get reelected. So if they hear from their constituents,
Did they just not hear enough from people about why this? I thought there were a lot of parents engaged more than I'd seen on this particular issue, and it still wasn't enough. Just not enough parents, just not enough students, not enough people in communities.
I think they heard more from school boards and the teacher union.
How effective was the argument that this was bad for rural communities?
Well, I'm from a rural community. No, Representative Moon is from a rural community. A lot of us on the committee that voted for it are.
I mean, Kirby is from a rural community.
He's also an ex-superintendent.
That's the difference. That's really a shame. How bad was that? I mean, what did you think of that? I mean, did you expect that vote was going to come down like that?
Yes.
You did. You weren't surprised at all.
No.
That's really interesting.
Not at all. And they seem to think this is going to harm the public schools for some reason.
I wanted to ask about that. Why so much deference for public schools? Because, I mean, Stephen Thane was here, and I know you know Stephen, and I asked him about the quality of the public schools, and he described them as mediocre.
That's generous.
What would you call them?
Mediocre at best.
Mediocre
Most
at
of them.
best. So why all this deference for a program that is producing such awful results?
Honestly, I don't know. They kept saying, this is taking money away from the public schools. Well, the public schools do not own that money. It comes from the parents, from the taxpayers. And, they just have this mindset that that's their money and it belongs to them. And if there's no competition, then they can do pretty much what they want. We can set out line items to say you will use this for reading. You will bring these kids' reading proficiency up or their math or whatever. And it doesn't matter because once that chunk of money goes to the schools, they can do whatever they want with it. We thought if we gave the beginning teachers more money, and now they're up to 42, I think, to start with, 42,000, and increased it, maybe that would help. What it really takes is an administrator that understands and wants to make their school the very, very best possible. So council is a fantastic example of that. That was a school for 20 years. They had a very mediocre superintendent. He didn't even care if the paint was falling off the walls, if the kids were at the bottom on reading, on everything. He basically did nothing. And good teachers didn't want to go there because they weren't allowed to thrive. And then they had a new superintendent who grew up there. He knew the school board, and he wanted that school to return to what it used to be when he was there. And he has brought that school up. It's almost now the very best small school as far as education in the whole state.
Really?
It's remarkable. It really is. He's done a great job. His teachers are thrilled to be there.
It really comes down to that person, which is why
it does.
I wondered about how that translates into the discussion that's underway regarding putting some money aside for charter schools, specifically so we can do more of these Hillsdale schools. Because the emphasis has been on, well, the administrator there, I don't remember his name.
Steve Lambert.
Steve Lambert is doing a really good job. And my team, I think, has been over to see him. But what if you didn't have the same administrator? Would you get the same result? Maybe you'd still have the trappings of Hillsdale, which is good. But would there be concern that, it's government, so the wrong administrator comes in, maybe with a partnership with Bloom, it might work. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
You really need a strong leader who understands and wants to make that difference for kids. It's vital. It really is.
Because you have some, I read quite often the column that's written by the 4 former superintendents, and 2 of them are from your neck of the woods, one from Fruitland, the other one from Weiser. And they talk about how great their schools are. And then I go and I look up their test results, and, there's one of those, I can't remember which one. It was like nearly 90% of the kids couldn't pass the college entrance exam. And it's just stunning.
It is. Fruitland, they were really, really upset when that charter school came in, and they were really mad at me. They thought I was the one doing this whole thing. All I did was get a bill passed for administrators. but they were furious and they blamed that whole thing on me because kids left their school to go over to this new school.
They weren't angry that the kids were leaving to get an inferior education. They were angry that they were just going somewhere where they could get a better quality education.
Because they were taking the money with
They
them.
were taking the money.
Yeah.
Amazing. Can you fix the public education system?
I don't know.
I mean, you've been trying for a long time.
Just kind of fussing around the edges, trying to make things better. And honestly, those Hillsdale charter schools are fantastic. It is amazing. You know, to have a really strong leader, that sets the whole tone in the school. But to have that model, that really goes a long ways to help.
Now, I know that you're on the conservative side of the spectrum and that you just said that the education system, you know, to call it mediocre would be generous. But you have looked at the possibility of supporting pre-kindergarten programs and full day kindergarten, at least at one point in your life. I don't know if that's still what you're thinking today. Where are you on those two?
Not pre-K. I've never
Well,
supported
you
that.
liked the Waterford idea where you take the Waterford Institute and you use their programming for pre-kindergartens. It wouldn't be quite the full blown out, let's take your 3-year-old to the public school, but it still is more state involvement. So I'm trying to figure out where your cutoff is.
Okay, so you told me when you had a daycare, you used that.
That's true.
And
in fact, my grandbaby is watching the Waterford videos. They're dated looking from 1990 whatever, but yeah, we're still using them.
they're great. And for parents to use that at home, I was all for that. 100%. That's great.
But you haven't advanced that since then. I had some reservations about the idea of if it's so wonderful, why does the government have to be in the middle of this whole thing? But
I don't.
you haven't advanced that. You haven't done anything with it. So is that to say you're looking at another solution, or you're staying out of it, or you maybe other things have taken priority?
Well, that's something the government, as far as it goes, that was just funding so that people would be able to use that in their home for their kids.
Do you need that though? Do you have to have government involvement at all?
If you want money for
Sure,
the
but I'm
program.
just kinda thinking about, okay, we look and we go, "Oh, water." And by the way, since I've only been a grandparent for, like, 14 months, I'm still learning the new things that are out there, but so back then there was Waterford, and so if you said to me Waterford, I was like, "Oh, yeah, Waterford, that's great." But now there's, like, Cocoa Melon and all these, I don't even know. There's the Baby Shark and all this other stuff that didn't exist when my kids were little. Wouldn't the government playing a part saying, "Yes, Waterford," put pressure on the marketplace and drown out new alternative competing ideas?
Well, when we talked about it, that was how many years ago? It's
It's
been
been about 10
quite a
years, I
while
think, yeah.
ago. Yeah. And hopefully some parents will actually look at different things. You know, parents are so busy all the time. It's incredible now. Both parents have to work just to be able to survive. And then they have other kids, little ones. They don't have a whole lot of time to do research, unfortunately.
Tell me what the philosophy behind that, because I know that you believe in limited government, right?
Mhm.
But what you're saying is, I think, that the government plays should has to play a part because of their limited time, their ability, the need to have a two-income household, and so on. But
Well, that's the reason why I thought it would be great is that would be one avenue for parents that were super busy. They could do that. Or maybe for parents that just didn't know how to do research to find something else. I just wanted to give them some kind of help. And I know Utah was using it and they had really good success.
is there an argument that parents are super busy because they're being taxed so much to pay for these government programs that they're no longer being able to be at home with their kids on?
Well,
So you're
that's some
you're
of it.
you're trying to attack the problem that the government created in a sense, right? Or no?
What I was trying to do is give the kids and the parents just a leg up so they could start learning early. I taught my kids how to read when they were 4. Not all parents do that. They don't even know they can, some of them. And I was yelled at by my son's first grade teacher because he could read. He was reading at 3rd grade level when he got into first grade, and she was mad at me. And she said, "That's my job to teach kids to
No
read."
kidding.
And I said, "Well, you don't have to teach him. You can teach a kid that doesn't know how to read." And she said, "What if you would have taught him wrong?" Like, well, obviously I didn't if he's reading at 3rd grade level. Anyway,
But then doesn't that just say that the government already believes it has a role, a big role, and they're always going to seek this path to expand it? So if you start a program where, okay, we're going to give reading material we're going to provide a vehicle to give reading material to parents because they're busy, wouldn't the government eventually go, well, we're doing this program, maybe we should take it the next step and get them into the building and hire teachers and do all that 3-year-olds?
they might, but that was private enterprise. We were just providing money. It was a pilot just to try it, to see how it would work.
Hmm.
The government really didn't have a role to say, you have to learn this, that, or the other.
Yeah, now, but
Well, that's why you watch and see what they're doing. That's why it was a pilot,
you mean this
just to
this
try
this
it.
legislature that can barely tie its own shoes, they're gonna keep an eye on this program that they created and quietly forgot about?
Well, that was 10 years ago.
I
That was
kinda
a little different back then.
I just remember, there was a number of years ago that, what is it called? The Challenge Youth Program. It's up there, I think, in Orofino or
Pierce.
Lewiston. Oh, is
Pierce.
it Pierce? Okay, yes, in
Yes.
Pierce. And I remember that bill came up and they're like, "This is the only time you're gonna hear about the Challenge Youth Program. We need this appropriation, blah, blah, blah." And then now it's like coming back every year. It just that's the way government operates. It's kind of scary. So you come up with this idea and you're like, "Okay, we're gonna do a pilot."
Well, that really wasn't a pilot because that came from the National Guard, and that had been
Okay,
successful
in that
for
case, it started out as a federal program through the Guard,
through the
and then it
Guard.
became a state program, but these things happen all the time, they just take different forms. That's just this growth of government thing that we keep talking about.
Now that program, I think, is a really good one. It's worth tax money. That's kids who have otherwise they're not gonna graduate at all.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just wondering about this diminishing of the role of the private sector. Before the National Guard got involved and before the state took it over, those were functions that went to families and
Juvenile
churches.
delinquents.
Well, no, but okay,
Yeah.
you have that too, but you also
Mhm.
have this role that's being is it unreasonable to say that the the role of individuals and families and churches and community organizations has been diminished in place of a government program?
And that started a long time ago. That started back in the '60s with the project,
Well,
the housing
the
projects and
housing
all the other
projects,
things,
the
the
Great
welfare.
Society, the New Deal before that, but
Absolutely.
isn't that the heart at the heart of what's wrong in society today? That there's how do you and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, of course, but I'm just wondering because as somebody who has watched this over the years, you've seen it in Congress, you've seen it in the legislature, and there's more and more. I told somebody today that if you created a government program to deliver, like Amazon, clothes for your kids that day, where you don't have
Mm.
to worry about what they have to wear and you don't have to wash it, it's just there it is, it shows up on your doorstep. Everybody in America would sign up for it, and they'd forget about what it takes to like, everybody. A majority.
Some
A
people would
majority
probably.
enough would do it, and those people, if it's even 10%, those people would forget how to perform that parental role. Much the way parents don't worry about packing their kids' lunches. They just give them some money and send them out the door, and they go to get a school lunch. It's easy. How much of a concern is that that's ultimately what those programs lead to?
I don't know if it does. I mean, I do know that challenge program has helped a
Yeah, no, I
lot of
wasn't I
kids.
wasn't talking specifically
Oh, okay.
about that, but I'm just talking about just generally, the legislature and the state are taking on more responsibilities. The latest one you just described with the workforce housing project, but
Yeah.
it could easily be, home winter assistance, home winter, weatherization assistance, or um, uh, Idaho's version of Section 8 housing, or an earned income tax credit, like a lot of other liberal states have, or just dole out money to you. Um, does it seem as if that's where we're going with some of these? Like, we're just taking on more and more responsibilities away from the private sector.
I think that has happened with all that federal money. It's like, where can we spend it? How can we do it? Instead of saying, no, we don't want it, give it to somebody else.
Like what happened with, okay, I did want to hit on the full day kindergarten piece. Moving through very rapidly at the legislature. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there was 5 bills over in the Senate, nothing over on our side. Last year I was talking with Senator Crabtree, and our idea was if we had optional full day kindergarten, then we also wanted to put in the bill that any school district which took that money from the state for that program, they could not do supplemental levies for full day kindergarten, because that's where most of those are coming from, is supplemental levies. It's my understanding, though, that the bill that's coming through now, that's been removed.
So you're just getting optional full day kindergarten.
Apparently.
And what's your disposition on that idea? Not there.
I'm not for that because I wanted to offer some tax relief. I don't think districts should be able to get money for full day kindergarten and then also do supplemental levies for it. That's not being honest.
And of course, there's always the risk that they'll just switch uses. Okay, we won't do the supplemental levy, but we'll figure out a way to fund something else with our levy instead. Unless you just tell them they don't have levy authority. Should these schools even have levy authority?
I don't know. You'd think the taxpayers would get sick and tired of it, but they don't seem to.
Well, I mean, because they're electioneering machines over there at the school district. They just know how to conduct elections, and they're good at it. They know about as much on that as they do educating kids.
Especially elections this time of year and in August when most people aren't even thinking about elections. We tried to get rid of those 2 extra days for years, never been successful.
So we just got done with a levy election a couple days ago,
Yep.
and then we'll have another series in August, and then again in November.
And in May.
Oh yeah, in May, and in May,
Mhm.
you're right. We're having one in May.
Mhm.
We just get clobbered over the head.
Mhm.
You would vote to get rid of the. Would you vote to lower their supermajority to pass a bond? Because that's their argument.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Mm-mm.
But they need buildings. Just kidding. They don't really need buildings. What did you think of the property tax idea where the schools get to keep their bonds and levies, and the property tax goes down for residential houses? And I know I'm switching over to tax policy. Sorry, that wasn't you mentioned
That's
this.
okay.
You mentioned levies, and we just went right into the tax policy. Jim Rice's bill.
Adding 2 more cents to food in border communities like District 9, that isn't going to fly very well over there. And when you have any small business in those border communities in Idaho, they're already fighting and struggling and competing with Ontario with zero sales tax. So let's say you're a small hardware business in maybe Payette, and now you have 8% more than your competitor over there in Oregon for any kind of product. It just is going to add more and more problems, I think.
Are your constituents clamoring for property tax relief?
Oh, they'd like it, but then they continue to vote for supplemental levies. And for some reason, there's a disconnect there.
So, how do you explain that?
I don't know.
So do you think the call is just not that they really aren't interested in property tax relief, or maybe They just don't like the idea that their levies are out of their the amount they're paying is out of their control because it can go up by 30% each time, but maybe they like a building project.
Honestly, I think there's a lot of reasons maybe. The supplemental levies, places like Weiser, they've had them for years, and I guess they're just used to them. Maybe they don't know all the money that's being poured into the schools with an 11.3% increase this year from the state.
It's a lot.
All those millions that came from the federal government, and yet they pull on people's heartstrings about, oh, well, we need new football uniforms, or, we need something new for this, that, or the other. Well, use the money you have before you ask people for more.
You at one time, I think you were favorable to the idea that the education system could be. I'm going to try to couch this without going into all these details. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this. There was one time when the state of Idaho operated under the schools operated under the steps and lanes method of paying teachers. And about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, we switched over. Has it been that long?
Can't remember. It's probably
We
been
switched
about
over
that
to this
long.
career ladder thing, and you were
Mhm.
favorable to that idea,
Mhm.
with the idea that it would help foster, a more fair system of compensating people, would attract better talent. Maybe it would help fix some of the problems with the schools.
Mhm.
Looking back on it now, did it do what you thought it would do? Has it been what you hoped, or is it something else?
It seems to be all right. I mean, the teachers like it. I haven't heard teachers complaining about it.
But the problem, the money that you talked about, is a lot of that is career ladder. That increase is.
Well, I think 90% of it is for personnel. I don't know if the teachers ever get it or what really happens to that money, because like I said, we send the money, it goes into a black hole, and they spend it for whatever they want. In fact, one of the superintendents in my district, when they were talking about this supplemental levy, he said, well, we don't have to spend it the way we have told the taxpayers. Thinking, really? So now you're saying we're going to use this money for this, this, and this, but then when you get the supplemental levy, you're going to use it for something
Yeah.
else?
They write the ballot language in such a way that they've got a tremendous amount of wiggle room.
To me, that's totally dishonest.
Yeah.
Very.
But okay, so they've got all this money flowing in, and the state money, and yet there's been no improvement in results really anywhere. So,
No.
and so did the career ladder work, I guess, is the question that I have. I mean, so the teachers are happy they get more money, but did it work? I guess if one of the outputs of the working was that education system got better.
I think it depends again on the superintendent. In council, it works great. Other places, maybe not so much.
Well, that would sound like it's not working then. Well, I mean, because theoretically, you could get rid of the steps and lanes and replace it not with the career ladder, but you could replace it with merit pay. Here's here's how much money we're going to give you for your salaries. You guys figure this out. And then you have, a teacher who's not great getting paid $30,000 and a teacher who's wonderful getting paid $100,000. And it's done not at the negotiating table, but it's done in the individual interaction between the teacher and the administration.
Well, we tried that as well. And what was happening? Superintendents were saying, all of my teachers are great because they're the ones that actually rate them.
Right. That was a function of that is a component of that career ladder part. But I'm talking about, okay, if you just said, look, maybe you did this, you got rid of collective bargaining, and you actually had people who were proficient in the administrative ranks at the schools, and their job was to say, like people do in the private sector, here's how much money I have for salaries, and I'm going to make sure my best people get that money, and the worst people get less. Maybe let them encourage them, but if not, they'll get fired. That doesn't exist in the public education system,
No, I don't think it ever has.
and certainly you're not going to get there with the career ladder, I guess. Or imagine.
I don't know if we get there in any manner.
Well, that
I
just
mean,
says,
we've been trying different things for years and nothing moves the needle. So this year, I told Representative Kirby last summer, I said, I am not going to vote for anything more until we have some accountability. We have been paying schools to fail kids. You know, the more they fail, the more money we send them instead of doing exactly the opposite. So schools like Council, who their growth with their kids have been tremendous, they don't get more money for that. But a school that fails their kids, we just dump more money to them. No, there's no accountability. So he went around and talked to people, and then he started dragging me around to talk to superintendents and teachers. And at first they were like, we can't do this. This would be terrible. Well, why are you here? You are here to teach children, not to fail them. And I'm fed up with it. So we had a bill, and then he decided he wanted to merge kindergarten in with the bill. Like, these are two different issues. Why are you doing this?
that was the discussion about, if I understand correctly, they were going to compensate schools according to performance on the IRI.
Yeah, the reading.
The reading indicator.
Mhm.
We've been talking about this stuff forever,
Mhm.
and nothing seems to change. At what point do you just kind of throw up your hands and say, maybe the government should not be in the education business? And I asked Stephen Thane that, and he fundamentally agreed with me that the government shouldn't, that the state's founders were wrong to incorporate public schools in the Constitution. What do you think?
Well, that was a long time ago. And maybe back then, well, I know back then, schools actually taught kids much, much better than now. I have my grandmother's 8th grade math textbook.
Oh, no.
It's like, wow.
Not even close.
Oh, it's like senior in college level. It's just remarkable. What in the world happened? How did we get that bad?
The conversation has been recently not so much about performance, but about the content of what kids are learning. We've talked a lot about critical race theory and social justice. Do you think that's happening in Idaho's public schools?
Well, we know it's happening. We had the
Because I read in the
BSU.
media that it's not happening.
Oh, of course. We had some of the BSU kids come and talk to us, with the promise that we would never say their names, that nobody would take pictures. They were scared to death to even come and talk about what was going on at BSU with that required foundations classes that taught them to hate America, that taught them they were terrible because they were white, that they had blue eyes or whatever. All that is done is totally divide Americans.
So let me go back. In 2020, after we found out that this was taking place at BSU and University of Idaho, the legislature said, get your house in order, cut the administrative bloat, and report back on how you've gotten back to your core mission. And the schools didn't do anything. Last year, the legislature cut $2.5 million from the college and university budgets, specifically targeted at social justice programs, and the schools have done nothing. What are you guys going to do about that?
Vote no on their budgets. The only thing we can do.
Do you have enough votes to kill their budget without that kind of a cut?
I don't know if we do.
Really?
I don't know.
Why is that?
Well, JFAC sends us the budget, and all we can do is vote yes or no. We can't dig into it and throw out different pieces.
Right, but in previous years, you have voted no multiple times, in fact. And this year, when I ask people about it, they'll say, well, I don't know if we'll get there.
Because it's an election year.
But
maybe they're hearing more about people don't cut the budgets.
I mean, they're getting an increase either way. I mean, it's not like they're going to get less money.
No kidding.
So what seems to be the problem? Do lawmakers understand they have oversight over the colleges and universities?
They should. They ought to. I don't know if they do or not.
Has the Germain committee or the committee that you're on indicated that they understand that they have I mean, has anyone on the education committee said, "By golly," because when I had Cloud here, he's like, "Well, I'm not really in the higher end. My thing is K-12." And then with Thane, it was pretty similar. It was, I'm focusing on this K-12 issue. Are the education committees of the legislature interested in paying attention to um, what's going on in higher ed, and will they hold them accountable?
Well, the problem is we never see the budgets. The germane committees do not get to focus on budgets. We have a presentation by the community college presidents, and then we have presentation by the university presidents. And you get to ask them, maybe the whole committee could ask them 5 questions, and then that's the end of it.
That's crazy.
And, last time when we were having these problems with the foundations down at BSU, I asked the president of BSU to please send us all of the curriculum. We want to see it ourselves, what the foundation is. We never got it.
You never got it.
Never got it.
Makes you suspicious, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just BSU, University of Idaho also. And Scott Green said, "Oh, this is just a false narrative created by," what did he call us? Conspiracy peddlers. I don't remember. It was some merchants of darkness, whatever.
Wow.
Do you buy what he's selling? That that's not happening there either.
Oh, I believe it is happening there. I talked to some of those kids too. I mean, maybe he doesn't know.
How would you not know?
Maybe his professors tell him otherwise.
Interesting.
Maybe he doesn't talk to the kids. I don't know
But
what
you
goes
have.
on up there.
But you have.
I have.
You have,
Mhm.
and it's happening.
Yeah.
And yet the legislature won't do anything about it.
Well, like I said, we don't get to ask questions.
How-
We're not the chairman. The
This is
chairman
a-
sets the agendas.
This is a really toxic, bad situation.
It is. I agree.
I mean, the impacts on Idahoans, it has to be incalculable. You can't have a discussion about the public policy issue. Why do you want to be part of this?
I don't know.
You don't have to, right? You don't need the work.
No. It's very, very frustrating. Very frustrating. What Wendy Horman, she ran for speaker, and she and I came up with a whole different kind of a plan, combining committees, having the germane committees involved in the budget for the agencies that we are supposed to oversee. We do have one day where one of the JFAC analysts can come and present however many budgets that committee has. So like the Natural Resource Committee, they have all of those. They have, IDL and parks, and there's 4 or 5 fish and game. And, they just go through it really fast, and you're like, where if we actually could dig down in the budgets and say, come and justify everything that you're doing, explain to us why you need this program, what's really, really important to you. But there's never time to do anything.
Seems by design.
Probably. And JFAC, there's 10 members from the House, 10 members from the Senate. They don't even have time to really delve into things. You get the baseline budget of what's gone on the previous year. You really don't even ever dig into that. It's just what are the enhancements that they want? What are the improvements or more money or whatever it is?
And the public never has a chance to weigh in either and say,
No.
"Hey, here's a program that you guys started 10 years ago that screwing with my business or is no longer useful," or whatever, and those don't come up either.
Unless you have a legislator who you go and talk to, and then they try to bring a bill to stop it, if possible. It's very, very messed up system. So those 20 legislators on JFAC, then they decide on a budget. It comes to the floor of either the House or the Senate, and then we are expected to vote on it. We aren't supposed to ask questions because supposedly the JFAC committee has already done all of that, and we're just supposed to vote yes or no, and we can't dig in and say, well, we don't like this program, let's eliminate it. Not allowed.
I mean, but you have. I mean, the House has been more as active as it's ever been, I think, in killing appropriation bills. Where did that energy come from?
Well, we had to kill the entire budget. We don't get to say, okay, we like this program and we don't like that
But
program.
before that didn't happen at all. So
Oh,
maybe
no.
the momentum is changing. And in fact, it says on the legislature's website and has for years that when a budget passes JFAC, it usually becomes law. And I told some of my legislative services friends, you might need to change your website because that's no longer true. Although now this year, I wonder if that will go revert back to the mean, which is we're just going to pass whatever JFAC sends for the most part.
Well, when we kill a budget and it goes back to JFAC, all they have to change is $100. And
they've
usually
done
they
that.
add $100.
So you don't even see value in that in that part of the fight. Killing, but you would still vote to kill the college and university budget, knowing that's a possibility.
But when it goes back to JFAC, are they going to do anything with it? Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably add another $100.
Well, if they just killed the DEI stuff, all those diversity, equity, and inclusion people in that budget, that would be something.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor this. What other things are you working on that we should know about?
Like education stuff?
Whatever you have on your mind.
Well, the Dyslexia Bill, I loved that we got that through finally. And I
Explain the Dyslexia Bill.
Well, 20% of Americans have dyslexia, and that just means they see things, they see words and letters differently, and so it's really hard for them to read. And that's never been recognized as an official learning problem. We're the only state, the last state in the union to recognize that. So these poor kids struggle through their whole life. Most of them are put in special education. They don't need special education. There's intervention tools that work really well for them, but they're not given those. So this bill spelled out what dyslexia is, spelled out what those intervention tools are, and spelled out this is not special ed, and different ways to identify the kids. So they're going to be tested, the K through third graders. And then if new kids come in fourth and fifth grade, or if a teacher or a parent says, I think my kid really does have dyslexia, I want them tested a little more, then we'll provide that. And then the teachers are going to get professional development so they can understand dyslexia, so they can understand how to teach it, how to recognize it.
What a weird thing that it's taken so long to do that, which seems fairly ordinary. Yeah. And we got wrapped up around all this other stuff, bullying and why?
I don't know. I really don't know, especially when 20% of the kids suffer through this. And, a lot of those kids, that's why they become the class clown, because they just flat can't read.
Because I learned more about social emotional learning over the last number of years than I'd ever heard about dyslexia until this year.
Exactly. And it is so vital. If you can't read, my goodness, that's
I didn't even hear,
life.
This is the third iteration of a governor standing in front of the legislature and saying, we should do something about literacy. I saw it, Kempthorne did it in the late 90s, Otter did it in the mid 2000s, and now Little's saying the same thing. And no one along the way said, hey, maybe as part of this literacy thing, you might want to think about whether there are some kids that simply can't read because they have dyslexia.
Yeah, because they don't learn in the same manner. It doesn't mean they're stupid at all.
No, but who's responsible? Why has that policy not been addressed by professionals running the system for all these years? That to the point that the legislature had to get involved and do that. It just seems strange.
Well, and teachers aren't taught that in college either. When I had a third grade 4-H'er, and he was in and out of my house a lot. His parents were very, very dear friends of mine. I didn't realize that he couldn't read that well. I mean, he never tried at my house. He could fix anything. Oh my gosh, kid is brilliant. And then in that first 9 weeks, his mom called me really upset. They just had the parent-teacher conference, and this first-year teacher informed them their son was stupid. He had dyslexia. They had to face that he never, ever will be able to learn.
I think you told me that story. Was that the one that you took under your wing and
Yes.
helped out? I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt your story. Tell
Yeah.
me tell him what you did.
I had no idea how to teach this kid how to read, but he came to my house just about every single day. And when we sat down, I said, "You know what? I know you are super smart. I have no idea how to help you, but we're going to struggle through this and you're going to figure out how to do it on your own because I know you can. And when it comes time for you to write your 4-H story in your record book, you're going to be able to do it." And he gave me a big smile and said, "Really? You think so?" I said, "Yep, absolutely." And he did.
Amazing.
He did. He figured it out on his own. And then when he was about in 7th grade, he came home and he threw down his books and papers because he was with my son. And of course, I'm looking at his papers and I said, "What is that?" It was some English paper. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. Misspelled words. It was all run on sentence. I said, "You can do better than that." He said, "Well, if you wanted me to, I could do it, but my teacher doesn't care, so it doesn't
Ooh,
matter."
oof.
Yeah.
So we can't have a vote on maybe just getting the government out of this business in the first place because it just seems like it's not working very well. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there.
Well, that's why lots of parents are removing their kids. They're homeschooling them. They're doing online. They're doing private school.
What would Helen say if she saw us where we are today?
I think she'd be horrified.
I mean, she was there, she's seen not just Congress, but she spent a lot of time in the Capitol.
Mhm.
She knows, I mean, she knew what all that was. What what do you think if she were to say, here's how it was then and here's how it is now? And I know we're getting inside the head of somebody that we all loved, but you don't really know. But you knew her really well. I mean, what would her initial reaction be in comparing the two from years ago to today?
She would say, "How did this happen? Why did this happen?" I think it's just reflective of our society. Look how much it's changed. No, and all my colleagues there do the best they can. They really do. Maybe they don't have that look back like we have, of where we've been and where we are now. And it's the same way of with our society. Look what it was in the 70s to what it is today.
There's something not great happening.
Exactly. We're falling apart. We're disintegrating.
One last question, unless you have other things on your mind that we didn't get to.
Go ahead.
You look good. You're feeling well.
Mhm. I'm
Good.
just exhausted.
Yeah.
This time of year,
Because
everybody is.
you had that health scare a while back. I just never had a chance to ask you if things were going well. It seems like you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
Wonderful. Glad to hear
Thank
that.
you.
Glad to hear that. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time. And since this is Thursday, oh gosh, I always do this. I forget who we're having on Tuesday. Dustin, tell me who it is. No idea. No idea. How about that? Maybe it may be nobody. I don't know. But we'll be back again. Oh, it's Sage Dixon. Excellent. Looking forward to that. Sage Dixon will be on Tuesday. Hope to see you then. The Steph Lucas program, Recapping the Week, is on tomorrow. So hope you watch that. Don't watch the Idaho Public Television Roundtable. Do you watch the Public Television Roundtable? The reporter roundtable or whatever they do.
Oh, let's see. I
Idaho
was on it
Idaho
last
Idaho reports.
Friday.
Oh, you're on there. I
Idaho
never watched it
Reports,
anymore.
but I haven't got to see it because I don't have time.
I never watch it. I just advise people not to watch it. Okay, you can watch Judy on there, but there's no real reason to pay attention to public television. Just watch this program.
Oh, no, I like Melissa.
It's more. I like Melissa too. She just
Mhm.
shouldn't be working for the state of Idaho. Maybe.
You could have a lot worse people.
I'm hardcore. I'm hardcore, Judy. I think that she's no different than Betsy Russell, but that's
Oh
just me. Was
my,
that too
I
much?
do.
Okay,
She's 100%.
that was too far. Sorry.
She's a very kind lady.
She is a kind lady. You're right. I went too far. She's not Betsy Russell. She just shouldn't be in the working for the state of Idaho.
So offer her a job.
That's all the time we have. Thank you for being here.